Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. It is Wind Down Wednesday. Today is September 27th. So excited to talk with y'all tonight about this topic, about parent-teacher conferences. So much for us to discuss this evening. But go ahead and grab what you need to get cozy, and I'll see you back here in about 30 seconds. All right. Hi, everybody. This Wednesday, I am so excited. This has been such a busy week. We've got the ISB Bilingual Directors meeting happening this week. So it was so wonderful to see so many friends and familiar faces today. And we're going into tomorrow with lots more information and lots more opportunities to connect. So very, very excited that we have that happening. And just, again, so much happening in schools and classrooms everywhere. I have been on the struggle bus the past 2 weeks. And I've been in a few different schools and districts and wearing gym shoes. And if you know me, I love wearing my heels and my boots and all of those things. And I love wearing a bright, colorful dress everywhere I go. But I've had issues with my tailbone and my hips for decades, truly just decades. And now I've reached the fun age where if it rains, all of your old injuries just hurt nonstop. So I have just been waddling like a duck for going on 2 weeks now. And I can't sit, stand, lay down without being in pain. So it's been fun. So if you see me out and about and I'm in gym shoes and I'm waddling, that's why. I'm working on it. But y'all, it is persistent. It's not going away. But anyway, so many wonderful things happening in schools, but I wanted to talk about this because I've been in a lot of different schools and districts in the past few weeks, and people are already, starting to prep for their first round of parent-teacher conferences or family conferences or student learning conferences. So whatever your district calls it, I know a lot of people are already getting prepped and ready for those. And so I thought this would be a great time for us to kind of come together and share some thoughts and ideas about how we set it up and what takes place and what tools might we provide to families during those conferences. Now, and you see it on the bottom there, I'm using the term parent-teacher conferences because that is the term that I still see most often used in schools. But this is also a good time for us to have a dialogue about is that the most inclusive, way to frame it? Is it a parent-teacher conference? Can we call it family student conference, something like that, so that it is a more inclusive title? So again, just another consideration for us as we plan. But oh my goodness, there's so much, and every school and every district just does it a little bit different, which is great, right? We all kind of do things and tweak things to meet the needs of our communities that we serve, which is wonderful. But this is also a good time to say, okay, what practices are not serving our families anymore? Maybe they worked really well for us 10 years ago. What are some structures that we might need to either revisit or revitalize a little bit, or just say, let's stop doing this, let's do this instead. I talk a lot about that when I do conferences and stuff, just practices that we can retire, and I think so many of our schools are filled with practices that have just been kind of passed down, and some of them work really well, right? Some of them are tried and true, let's keep on rocking and rolling, and then other ones were well, I guess we don't really have to do it this way, right? People always say the most dangerous phrase in education is that's how we've always done it. So on that note, let's talk about some ways for us to, serve our families and our students in the best way forward and most inclusive way and the most linguistically supportive ways. And so this kind of even begins like the prep work now. So if we are looking at doing our conferences in October, what communications are we sending out now to families? Like, what are the systems and structures that we use? I remember for a long time, everyone in my school was expected to use like Sign Up Genius, like it's an online platform, right? Like you set up an account as a family member, you set up an account, you log in, and like as the teacher on the back end, I can go in and set all of the times and dates available, right? And so as a parent or a family member, I log in, I see what things are available, and I select it, and then it bounces an email to the teacher and to me, reminding all of us of the time. So that's cool. That's cool. That's a great system if all of your families have access to internet, utilize an email for communication daily, weekly, and have the resources to be able to do that, and the language resources, right, to be able to go in and log in. I remember trying that out and saying, like, no one's using this resource, like this structure as a tool to sign up for conferences, so I need to do something a little different. And I think giving ourselves permission to say, like, maybe that is working well for other classrooms, but for the community that I am serving, like, I need to make sure that I'm making my adjustments along the way to meet them where they're at, right? And so it ended up, I was able to utilize like a class mom, and she was like a mother, so that's why I'm using that term, of a student. And so she was like, hey, I'm going to go ahead and create the schedule for you. And so it's like, all right, here's all the dates and times available. And there were some that I was like, I'm going to go ahead and schedule myself. Just, I needed to have that time on the phone, but I can't do that for everybody on my, roster. So it was very helpful to have that family member who was willing to partner with me and help me create that schedule. So certain things that we can talk about as we're beginning to like even just think about structure. So like, how do parents sign up, right? If the expectation is that everybody signs up on a digital platform, a really easy thing to do is to create a screencast that shows the process. Now that might be done by you. It might be done by like a tech coach or an instructional coach or like a district leader, somebody, right? To just kind of walk through the steps. We cannot assume that everybody's using the same, types of systems and structures, right? Because we serve families from all over the community, all over the state, all over the country, and all over the world, right? So everyone has different familiarity and comfort levels with tech. I will also say sometimes families are a little bit resistant to like say, okay, like this is this account, right? The teacher is asking me to create. How comfortable do I feel as a family member entering all that information into a computer? Maybe I don't feel comfortable. So for those families, like if you are, expecting everyone to sign up with that, put a little note at the bottom. If you need help with this, call this number. Or if you need help setting up your conference time, just call Mrs. Spina and y'all can set it up over the phone. Okay. So giving just different pathways, right, into setting up the time at all, I think is super helpful. Another thing to discuss is, do all of these conferences have to be face-to-face? Now, there's certainly some, like, I think it's wonderful as much as we possibly can to have those face-to-face interactions and invite folks into the learning space, right? Like, I want them to see where their child sits in the classroom and like, what the room looks like and how we have things set up and all of those things. But I also know for some families, it is really, really challenging to get all the way to the schoolhouse during this particular window of time, right? During like conference week or the conference day. And so for some families, like I will like put on my communication home, if being face-to-face is a hardship for you, like let's have a phone conference. Like that's totally fine. And again, we might have to be really mindful and intentional, just depending on, what might come up with certain conferences that we're going to have. But like just kind of stretching our flexibility a little bit, right? Remember how flexible we had to be during, like Zoom teaching all those years, like we can still invite some of those things in. We were all on Zoom all the time. So let's go ahead and use it if those needs arise. And then location. So if a family member has some type of hesitancy about coming into the school for whatever reason, maybe their own childhood, like school traumas, like that's a real thing. And I want to just be respectful and mindful of it. So if there was like, and again, depending on the nature of what might come up in a conversation, maybe it's not best to meet at a Starbucks, like a very public place, but maybe I can rent a room for free at the public library. And that's real cool because, you know, the public library, that's there for everybody. And that's really great to get families and kids into our local library. So reach out to your, the libraries in your community, see if you can, use that space. But again, there's such value, I think, in having those conferences take place inside of the classroom. But again, location can be hard. Transportation to the location can be hard. And then the other thing is, I know a lot of times, like when we have district or school level communication that goes out that says, information about the conferences coming up, there's something that says like, don't bring your other kids. That might pose a really big hardship on some of our families. So I might say, okay, yeah, I saw the district note about like, don't bring your other siblings, but hey, go ahead and bring them in. I'll have like a little area over here where they can color or draw or like go online or whatever, right? Like a little station that's set up just for them. But we're here to talk about, this student. But please bring whoever, you need to bring, like, we want to just kind of break down some of the barriers that might stand in the way. And then, so however we set up our conferences, when it actually takes place, that moment where we're like, okay, like conference day is here, like this is your day and time. There's a few things that I will do so that the conversation can be super, super helpful. One thing that I'll give in advance is something that looks like this, and it's why contact the teacher. And this is typically something that I would pass out at like a back to school night, like a curriculum night. But this tool, and you can find it on my blog. It's in one of my posts about like communication preferences. I think it's like I'll link it once this is done. It's like the high communication is not a two-way street. It's a highway interchange. So I have a few different templates, but one of them is like reasons why you might reach out to the teacher. And again, all of our families have different expectations of how they might utilize the classroom teacher. So for me, I gave my families like examples of like reasons why you might call me. So one is like, I want to share something great about my child or my family, or I want to talk about ways to help my child, or I want to like participate in this upcoming event, or I want to volunteer, or my kid wants to participate in something like an after school club or activity, and I would like help signing them up because I don't know how to do that, but she keeps talking about it. She heard there was a chess club. Can you help me get connected to that? And then again, I just give like lots of different examples of ways, like reasons why they might reach out to me, because again, expectations for, how I'm, communicating with my teacher. Maybe I have the understanding that I only contact the teacher if there's an absence, and that's it. Otherwise I shouldn't be reaching out. So I give families this. This is also a great thing to do, like great for all school year long, but it's a great thing to revisit at parent teacher conference time. Because again, like I just want to extend, this is not an extensive list. This doesn't have all the reasons, but like these are reasons why you might reach out to me, because we're partners in this, in the school year. Another great thing to do is if you speak an additional language in your space. So like I know a lot of us who are, we do work with the IRC. We are serving multilingual students. So students in EL, bilingual, dual language, right? But we serve and support students all across the building. So there are times where, like, if I have to wear a lanyard for work, and I know most of us do, if you grab one of these buttons, then like they sell them in like bulk packs, like on Amazon, or if you have a button maker, you can make your own. But share your linguistic asset. So if you're the EL teacher and you're going into all of these different conferences, likely you already know which families are like and require an interpreter or whatever. But it's just a great way to show everybody else your linguistic talents, right? And your linguistic assets, and it just helps to elevate languages in the space too. And somebody might look at you and be like, oh, wait, you speak Spanish? And I always got that because they're like, oh, eres la rubia, right? Like you're the blonde teacher. I'm like, yeah, I know I speak Spanish. And so that was like a helpful tool just to always have visible, like during the school day, after school, at events in the community, all of those things. So that is a nice one to just kind of have on hand. But I also want to make sure that like anytime I have families in front of me, there are lots of different things that we tend to share during a parent-teacher conference. And one is like data. One is data. And like we're sharing, different like benchmarking scores. I want us to be really mindful of like, what is the purpose of this? Like sometimes parents are really hungry to know like where their child is, like if they're, right on track, if they're falling behind, or if they're exceeding in anything. So again, sometimes that can be piece of the conversation. But if you share any type of data, I also want you to share language data with that family. And, we often talk about like, sharing proficiency level scores. And I think that's cool and that's fine. But if you are serving a student who has been in an EL or like TBE or dual language program for a few years now, I want you to bring in historical access data and show the family language growth over the past few years. And to do that, make sure you're not looking at the proficiency level score, right? The decimal score. Look at the scale score. And if you have like your LMS system, like PowerSchool or whatever, sometimes you can generate like a graphic straight from that like table. Other times you can't. But I would go in like to like one of those free like graph generators, like just, on the internets and type in the scale score so you could have like a visual representation of language growth to share with families. Because again, sometimes families are like, I don't even know what EL is. Like, I don't know what that means and what y'all do and like how you set it up and all of those things. So I think sometimes having some evidence to share with families like, hey, your child is making some language growth here. Like, let's look at how they have progressed since, second grade. Now they're here in fifth grade. Like, look at how much language they've grown in reading and writing and listening and speaking. And, hey, we noticed that we want to make sure that we're really targeting opportunities for speaking, right? So that's what we're working on here at school. Like, I'm going to be looking at ways to, get them expressing themselves more, like to me or to classmates or to a device or whatever, whatever the audience might be. So I can give like some concrete examples of how I'm going to be using that data to, drive my instruction. So I think that's helpful, and it's encouraging to families too, because if we bring families and like we're pulling them out of whatever they're doing, if they're working or if they're coming to the school and hauling, all their kids to school, we don't want any family to leave feeling defeated, right? If we're showing all kinds of data, we need to be mindful of which pieces, like are all the pieces of the data showing one thing, and is it negative? Is this family going to leave from the conference feeling defeated, like, oh my goodness, there's just so much, work to be done, or like whatever? So if we have to take a look at that data, we have to be super honest of like, okay, which are the priority pieces that we really need to talk about today? And how do I make sure that this family leaves here feeling like, yes, like we're doing a lot of really great things? Because there's nothing more disheartening and discouraging than having somebody sit across from you at a table and just show you chart after chart after table of like, your students behind. Your students behind in this measure, your students behind in this measure, all of these different things. I would leave feeling completely defeated. So tell me some things that my student is doing really well in, right? I would also really caution us to avoid the compliment sandwich. The compliment sandwich. I remember being taught this in my undergrad of like, hey, if you have to share some hard news or some bad news with families, just deliver a compliment sandwich, right? Like put the bad news in between two good pieces. Let me tell you, the compliment sandwich, it's phony baloney. It's phony baloney. And if we're giving families like a steady diet of like a good communication home, positive communication home, we don't need to force feed anybody a compliment sandwich. Many times when we try that compliment sandwich method, it's like taking three very unrelated things and like serving it, right? Like, here you go. And so if I am the recipient of the compliment sandwich and you're telling me three very unrelated things, I'm like, okay, well, wait a minute. Is my child doing well or not? Right? Like, okay, well, your child was so helpful on the playground yesterday. They're failing, all of their content classes, but they were so nice in music. And you're like, number one, like, what's the relation between these three things? Like, it just doesn't feel authentic. You know what I mean? And we don't want anyone receiving that compliment sandwich and saying like, this feels fake. This feels inauthentic, right? Like, let's just have a good dialogue, right? And let's make sure we are giving the family some encouragement. Another really big thing to mention at these conferences is, how are we communicating to the family how much we value and love their heritage language? So we cannot tell any one family, it's so unethical, and it's very immoral to say to a family like, you need to concentrate on it. No, they're languaging using all their capacities, and let's continue that. So I always said to families, like, make sure that you're continuing to like have dialogues in Arabic or in Gujarati or in Mongolian, whatever your language at home is. Make sure you are still utilizing, right, your heritage language. That's a huge piece who our students are and who our families are. And I still, to this day, I still hear stories from families who will tell me, oh, Mrs. Spina, like, my pediatrician told me, get ready. My pediatrician told me that we shouldn't be speaking this language or that language at home because it's confusing them. And I should try to speak just English at home. Y'all, this is still something that families are hearing from different folks in their life. So it is so, so important from the schoolhouse that we are telling families, like, they're getting lots of English at school. Make sure you're maintaining, right, that heritage language at home, because that's so, so important. And we want to make sure, like, do you know where to find, books in your language? Like, if they have literacy skills in that language, like, we've got all these resources. Let me show you a few tools of like what we have here at school. Like, you can show them the Unite for Literacy website with lots of different languages represented. But it is important that they hear directly from us how much we value their heritage language. So that's a huge piece to encourage and make sure that it gets brought up during that parent-teacher conference. And then I have shared this in a few different settings, but I'll mention it here too, because this might be like a little takeaway, a little tool that you hand to folks. And this is all about like calling in. Like, if you're a family member and, your child comes into the kitchen in the morning and says, Mom, I'm sick, or Dad, I'm sick, or Theo, I'm sick, I can't go to school today. That's a lot. It makes for an extra hectic morning. And the way that families are expected to call out their child is different, right, from building to building and from grade level to grade level. And so if you teach in an elementary setting, you might just give families something like this. Put a little magnet on the back. This is just a piece of paper that I laminated. It's not fancy, but it just says, to report an absence, call this number before this time. And I put it in English and Spanish, and boom, I'm done. But this is just super helpful. Like, so for me as a mom, I make these for my own house because I get so stressed in the morning. Like, wait, what is the number? Like, and then I'm trying to find it on the website. I can never find it before coffee and all of those things. If you teach middle school or secondary, you likely have, because those schools are typically larger, you likely have some type of like recording system of like, make sure you leave your name and your child's name and their student ID and like your cell phone, like all these things. And you're like, oh my gosh, how am I going to remember to like say all these things? I write a script. So this one says, hello, today's date is, 9:27, and the time is 7:24. My name is Carly Spina. I am the mother of da da da. Their student ID number is da da da. So it literally is just a script. And so, like, again, this is something that you might just like print, laminate, put a magnet on the back, and then send it home, like as a little tool. And if you're also a parent and they're a parent, right, you could say, like, I know how stressful those mornings are, so this is a tool that has helped me. So that is something that you might hand to them. But really, we want to just make sure that our families are leaving feeling good. They are leaving feeling supported. They're leaving feeling like their heritage language is valuable and loved and appreciated and respected by the teacher and by the school. So lots of other great, tips and tricks. If you are either watching this live with us tonight, or if you're catching the replay, we would love to hear how you set up your conferences. What are your biggest touch points during your conferences, and how do you want to make families leave feeling? Like, how do you want them to feel when the conference is over and they're walking out the door? How do you want them to feel? How do you want their student to feel? So lots to consider, but it is getting late and I've had a full day. So I'm going to go ahead and get to bed, and, all the heating pads for my hips and my tailbone, all of those things. But we'll be back next week with another episode of Wind Down Wednesday. Thank you so much for hanging out with us tonight, and we'll see you soon.